I didn't notice the necklace tightening the first time because it happened during a moment that already felt suffocating. That's how it works. Layers itself into stress, so you blame your own body. The necklace came to me after my mother's funeral in Ridgeport, Connecticut, tucked inside a velvet pouch at the bottom of her jewelry box. A thin, antique collar, dull silver links interlocked too precisely to be handmade, with a small oval clasp that felt warmer than the rest of the metal. My Aunt Helen told me it had belonged to my grandfather, passed down for protection. She said it quickly and wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't plan on wearing it. I'm not sentimental like that. But the night after the funeral, alone in my apartment on Bayview Terrace, the silence pressed in hard. I put the necklace on without ceremony, more out of habit than reverence. It rested lightly against my throat, cool and neutral. I slept poorly, but that wasn't unusual. The first time it tightened was during a meeting at work. I'm a compliance auditor. Conflict is my daily bread. That morning, I was sitting across from a contractor who'd been falsifying reports. He lied badly, sweating through his collar, and something about the way he kept insisting he'd done nothing wrong made my jaw clench. I felt the necklace warm, then contract, just a fraction, enough to notice, enough to make me swallow. I adjusted my shirt, took a breath, and the pressure eased. Coincidence, I told myself. Stress response. Psychosomatic nonsense. Then it happened again. And again. The pattern became obvious fast. Whenever I felt guilt, the collar tightened. Not just my guilt, specific guilt. The kind you avoid naming. When I ignored my sister Rachel's calls. When I signed off on a report knowing it would cost someone their job. When I thought about my father and the argument we never finished before he died. Each time the pressure increased just enough to force my attention inward. A reminder. A correction. I started testing it, which in hindsight was a bad idea. I lied to a colleague about a deadline, felt the necklace constrict immediately, sharp and precise. I apologized an hour later, heart racing, and the pressure released. It didn't care about social rules or outcomes. It reacted only to internal dissonance, to the space between what I did and what I knew I should have done. The dreams started soon after. I dreamed of standing in a courtroom with no judge, no jury, just rows of empty chairs. Every time I tried to speak, the necklace tightened until the words strangled off in my throat. I'd wake up gasping, fingers clawing at my neck. The collar cool and still, as if nothing had happened. I asked Helen about it. She went quiet. Told me my grandfather used to wear it every day after my grandmother died. Said he believed it kept him honest. When I pressed her, she finally admitted the truth. He died wearing it. Found in his chair, eyes open, hands clenched at his throat. The death certificate said heart failure. Helen said he'd been arguing with himself all night. I tried taking it off. The clasp resisted. Not stuck, just reluctant. It took more force than it should have. When it finally came free, the relief was immediate, like taking a full breath after holding it too long. I left it on the kitchen counter and went to bed. In the morning, it was back around my neck. After that, the consequences escalated. The collar tightened longer, harder. It didn't just respond to guilt anymore, it anticipated it. I'd feel pressure building before I even made a decision, like the necklace was weighing outcomes faster than my conscious mind could. Sometimes it tightened when I considered doing something wrong. Other times it tightened when I didn't act at all. Inaction, it seemed, counted. My body started to betray me, red marks along my neck, a constant soreness in my throat. People asked if I was sick. I stopped wearing collared shirts, stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. The necklace never fully loosened anymore. It hovered at a baseline tension, like a warning state. The breaking point came with Rachel. She showed up unannounced one night, furious, hurt, demanding answers I'd been avoiding for years. As she spoke, the necklace constricted violently, links grinding against each other. My vision blurred. I dropped to my knees, gasping. She thought I was having a medical emergency. Maybe I was. Between breaths, I told her the truth. All of it. The resentment, the jealousy, the relief I felt when our father died and the pressure lifted from my shoulders. Each confession loosened the necklace incrementally, like it was listening, recalibrating. By the time I finished, it rested lightly again, almost gently. That's when I understood. The necklace wasn't punishing me. It was enforcing balance. I don't try to remove it anymore. I've learned its thresholds. I've learned how little room it allows for self-deception. When I live clean, when I speak plainly, act decisively, confront what I'd rather avoid, it loosens. When I lie, even to myself, it tightens. Simple, brutal, effective. Sometimes late at night, when I think about the things I still haven't faced, I feel it warm, links shifting slightly, preparing. It doesn't want me dead. It just won't let me live wrong for very long.
You're listening to Lurking Moon. If the story keeps you company tonight, please like and subscribe.
I didn't remember the chair until it arrived. That's the strange part. It showed up in the back of a rental truck with my late grandfather's things, labeled in black marker, "Study, do not discard." I'd grown up in Millbrook, New York, but I hadn't set foot in my grandfather's house since I was a teenager. I didn't remember a study. I didn't remember the chair. Still, there it was. Dark walnut, high back, arms polished smooth by hands that lingered. It looked ordinary in the way old objects sometimes do, like they're trying not to be noticed. I put it in my apartment on Ridgeway Lane, near the window. The light hit it just right in the afternoon, revealing shallow grooves in the armrests where fingernails had pressed hard, repeatedly. I told myself it was stress wear. Old men grip furniture when they stand. That's what I told myself. The first time I sat in it, I didn't plan to stay long. Just a test. I eased down, felt the cushion give a little too easily, like it had learned how much to yield. The sensation came on fast, a heavy warmth spreading up my spine, settling behind my eyes. My heart rate spiked. My palms went damp. For a second, I was convinced I was having a panic attack. Then the emotions hit. Not mine. Not exactly. Grief, sharp and specific. Guilt that tasted metallic. A pressure in my chest like a hand bracing itself before pushing. I stood up too fast, dizzy, breath ragged. The feeling evaporated the moment my feet hit the floor. I laughed it off. Nervous system glitch. Long day. Too much coffee. I didn't sit in it again that night. The dreams started anyway. I dreamed I was sitting in the chair, hands gripping the arms, unable to move, watching my own life play out in fragments, arguments I'd buried, decisions I'd avoided, moments I'd told myself didn't matter. When I woke up, my fingers hurt, like I'd been clenching something for hours. I told my sister Mary Ann about it when she came by to help unpack. She's a therapist, big on somatic responses, memories stored in the body. She suggested the chair was a trigger. Old house, old associations. I asked her to sit in it. She laughed, rolled her eyes, and lowered herself carefully. She didn't even last 10 seconds. Her face drained of color, her shoulders hunched like she'd been braced against a blow. She stood abruptly, backing away, eyes wide. "No," she said. Just that. No explanation. She refused to elaborate, refused to look at it again. She left early and didn't answer my calls for 2 days. I started researching the chair. Old family records, estate inventories. Turns out the chair had been passed down quietly, never mentioned, never photographed. Always placed in a study or corner room. Always alone. My grandfather's brother had owned it before him.
He died suddenly in his 40s. The records listed cardiac event, but there were notes, handwritten, tucked into the margins, about episodes and refusal to sit. I made the mistake of inviting Caleb Morris, a friend from work, over. He's the kind of guy who treats fear like a challenge. When I warned him, he smirked and sat down hard, arms spread, daring the universe to do something. The chair accepted him instantly. His grin vanished, his eyes unfocused. He started sweating through his shirt. After maybe 20 seconds, he bolted upright and stumbled toward the door, breathing like he just ran a mile. He never came back. Later, he texted me one word: never. The chair didn't move on its own. It didn't creak. It didn't tilt toward anyone. It didn't need to. The effect was internal, surgical. Sitting in it didn't hurt you, it exposed you. It forced something up and out, something you'd sealed away and built a life on top of. The body reacted because the mind couldn't process it fast enough. I sat in it again, against my better judgment. Longer this time. Heat, pressure, a ringing in my ears like feedback. Then images, my grandfather in the chair, jaw clenched, eyes wet, staring at nothing. I felt his regret like it was my own. The choices he never made. The apologies he rehearsed but never delivered. The moment he realized it was too late to fix anything, only to endure it. I understood then. The chair wasn't cursed. It was honest. That made it worse. The more I resisted, the heavier the presence felt in the apartment. The chair drew attention without moving, like gravity. I'd catch myself standing near it, breathing shallow, heart racing, like my body knew something my conscious mind didn't want to accept. I started losing time again, minutes where I'd be standing beside it with no memory of approaching. I tried to get rid of it. Donation centers refused. Movers wouldn't take it. One guy swore at me and walked out mid-job. I dragged it down to the curb once. It was back by morning, exactly where it had been, dustless, patient. I don't sit in it anymore. I don't have to. I know what it does. It takes what you've been carrying and makes you feel it all at once, without filters, without mercy. No one does that twice. Most people can't do it once. The chair sits by the window now, empty, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can feel it remembering me.
I found the key in the sub-basement of Harland Textile, a brick carcass of a factory rotting at the edge of Dover Falls, New Jersey. I was there officially to assess structural integrity, unofficially to satisfy the itch that comes with abandoned spaces, the sense that something was left mid-sentence. The key lay half-buried in dust near an old boiler, orange with rust, heavier than it looked, its teeth oddly asymmetrical. No tag, no ring, no obvious lock anywhere nearby. I pocketed it without thinking. That's how it always starts. At home on Willow Park Avenue, I cleaned it under the sink. The rust didn't come off. It felt set, permanent. When I turned it over in my hand, I noticed faint scoring along the shaft, like it had been twisted hard, repeatedly, against resistance. I chalked it up to industrial wear, ideal in rationalizations for a living. Structural engineer, 37, divorced. Good at explaining why things stand or fall. The first door appeared 2 days later at Harland. I'd walked that building dozens of times, memorized its floor plan, traced old blueprints down to the inch. But on the second floor, between the locker room and a collapsed office, I noticed a narrow wooden door set flush into the brick. No markings, no hinges visible. It hadn't been there before. I'm certain of that. The key fit. The lock turned with a soft, relieved click, like something exhaling after holding its breath too long. The door opened into a short hallway with wallpaper that smelled faintly of damp paper and old soap. The lighting was wrong, too warm, too domestic for a factory. At the end of the hall was another door. I closed the first one behind me. When I turned back, the hallway was longer than it had been. I didn't go far that first time. I opened one door and found a small room with a single chair and a cracked mirror bolted to the wall. No windows, no vents, no reason to exist. I felt watched, not from behind, but from the walls themselves, like the space was paying attention. I left quickly. When I returned to the factory floor, the wooden door was gone, brick and mortar like it had never been disturbed. I tried to forget it. That lasted about a week. The key started getting heavier, not physically, mentally. I'd feel it in my pocket even when it wasn't there. I dreamed of hallways that folded back on themselves, of doors breathing quietly in the dark. I went back to Harland after hours, flashlight in hand, heart thudding like I was about to trespass somewhere I didn't have permission to exist. The door was there again. Different spot this time, same keyhole. Each door led to a room that felt tailored, a break room with a table set for one, coffee still warm, a bedroom that looked disturbingly like my old apartment on Cedar Lane, right down to the stain on the carpet I never quite managed to clean. None of these rooms appeared on any blueprint. None connected logically to the building's structure. They nested inside it like parasites. I brought my friend, Mark Ellison, a surveyor who trusts measurements more than instincts. He saw the door. He saw the hallway. He stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, he froze. Said the air felt wrong, thick, like standing underwater. He turned back, pale and sweating, and refused to go further. Later, he admitted something worse. While inside, he was convinced the hallway was rearranging itself behind us, closing options, narrowing paths. I started noticing doors elsewhere. An unmarked door behind the soda machine at work, a narrow frame in the back stairwell of my apartment building. Always the same keyhole, always the same soft click. I stopped opening them after the third time I found myself somewhere that felt unfinished. Rooms with missing corners, staircases that ended mid-step, a child's room with toys stacked neatly against the walls, as if clearing space for something large. The consequences crept in quietly. I lost time, hours I couldn't account for. I'd come home with dust on my shoes and no memory of where I'd been. My ex-wife Rachel called once, worried, said she'd seen me standing in the hallway outside her new place, staring at a door that didn't exist. I had no recollection of it. The key was warm in my pocket when she said it. The last door appeared in my apartment, bathroom wall, perfectly flush. I tried not to open it. I really did. But the key hummed when I held it near the lock, vibrating like it recognized home. Inside was a narrow room, barely big enough to stand in. The walls were lined with doors, dozens of them, each one slightly different, each one waiting. I understood then. The key wasn't opening doors, it was revealing them. Spaces folded into the margins of buildings, left behind when architects simplified plans and engineers shaved corners to make things efficient. Places that existed because something had to go somewhere. The key didn't belong to a door. The doors belonged to the key. I haven't opened a door in weeks. I keep the key wrapped in cloth, buried in a toolbox under my bed. But I hear it sometimes, late at night, turning by itself, testing locks that only it can see. I know one day I'll open the wrong door and won't find my way back to the plans I understand. Because some spaces aren't meant to be entered. They're meant to be added.
I found the book in the restricted stacks of Hallowmere University Library, wedged between two brittle volumes that hadn't been checked out since the 1960s. I was working late, again, cataloging neglected manuscripts for my dissertation, the kind of academic grunt work that makes hours collapse into each other. The book had no title on the spine, just a dull, cracked leather cover and a faint indentation where something had once been embossed, then deliberately scraped away. That should have been enough to leave it alone. The first page was worse. No author, no date, just a sentence written in tight, deliberate script. "You will stop here." I assumed it was a joke, some graduate student stunt from decades ago. I smiled, the way you do when you think you found something clever, and kept reading. The prose was dense but elegant, written like a personal account disguised as philosophy, observations about attention, perception, the way readers complete meaning by participating in the text. It felt uncomfortably intimate, like the book knew the kinds of questions I like to ask. I checked it out under my name, Lena Whitmore, Ph.D. candidate, comparative literature, and took it home to my apartment on Cedar Row, a narrow street that always smelled faintly of rain and dust. I made tea, sat on the couch, and read until midnight. Somewhere around page 90, the tone shifted. The sentences became shorter, more directive, less descriptive. I started noticing marginal notes that I hadn't seen before, tiny corrections, clarifications, questions written in a hand that looked unsettlingly similar to mine. That night I dreamed of pages turning by themselves, not flipping, waiting, like the book was pausing, letting me catch up. The next evening I tried to continue, chapter 7. Every reader I later spoke to would agree that's where it happens. The words became harder to follow, not because they were complex, but because they seemed to rearrange themselves when you weren't looking directly at them. I'd reread the same paragraph 3 times and come away with 3 different meanings. I started feeling watched, not by the room, but by the text itself, like it was tracking my attention, measuring my comprehension. I pushed through. That was my mistake. Around 112, my heart started racing for no obvious reason. My apartment felt smaller, quieter. I became convinced someone was standing just behind me, close enough that if I leaned back, I'd touch them. I didn't turn around. I knew better. The book lay open on my lap, and for the first time I noticed that the page numbers had changed. They no longer matched the table of contents. They no longer matched each other. I slammed the book shut. The paranoia didn't fade. It escalated. I started hearing soft sounds when I wasn't reading, paper shifting, a faint tapping like a fingernail against cardboard. I woke up at night certain someone was whispering my name, only to realize the sound was coming from the bookshelf, from the book, closed, patient. I brought it back to the library the next day and asked Marian Hale, the senior archivist, if she knew anything about it. Her face went pale when she saw it. She told me, very carefully, that no one finished that book. Not students, not professors, not once in the library's recorded history. Every reader stopped at chapter 7, some quietly, some not. A few had resigned from academia entirely. One had vanished for 6 months and returned unable to read at all. That should have ended it. Instead, I started seeing references to the book everywhere, footnotes in unrelated papers, quotations attributed to anonymous sources, entire arguments built around concepts lifted directly from its pages. It was like the book had infected the academic ecosystem, embedding itself where no one noticed unless they already knew what to look for. And it knew I was looking. I tried to destroy it. Fire wouldn't take. The pages blackened but didn't burn through. Water warped the cover but left the text untouched. I tore out chapter 7 once, just that section, and woke up the next morning to find it restored, the torn edges gone, the paper smooth and whole. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the pull. the sense that the book wasn't stopping me from finishing it. It was protecting me from what came next, like a guardrail at the edge of something steep and final. I became obsessed with the idea that if I could just push past that chapter, I'd understand everything about attention, about identity, about why reading sometimes feels like being read back. Last night, I opened the book again, just to look, just to confirm it hadn't changed. It had. The sentence on the first page was gone, replaced with something new. You are closer now. I didn't make it past the first paragraph of chapter 7 before the room started to tilt and my thoughts fractured into fragments that didn't feel like mine. I stopped, again. The book is back on my shelf now, right at eye level. I don't read it anymore. I don't have to. It watches. It waits. And I know, absolutely, that one day it will decide I'm ready to continue, whether I want to or not.
I bought the camera because I missed the sound it made. That dry, mechanical click. No screen, no instant feedback. Just the promise that something would exist later, whether you remembered it correctly or not. The shop was called Silver Line Photo, tucked under an overpass in Redfield, Ohio, run by a man named Gordon Meeks who smelled like fixer fluid and cigarettes. He said the camera, a battered Argus C3, came from an estate sale. No details, no story. That should have been another warning. I was working on a personal project at the time, documenting abandoned industrial sites along the Monroe River corridor. Old factories, closed rail depots, places where time stalled and never restarted. The camera behaved perfectly at first. Clean exposures, sharp grain, honest mistakes. I took a roll at the Hollister textile mill, alone, or so I thought. When I developed the film in Gordon's darkroom, I noticed something off in frame 17. A figure near the loading dock, tall, too close to the lens. I hadn't seen anyone there. I assumed it was a trick of light, long exposure, motion blur. The brain wants explanations. Frame 18 had it again, closer. Frame 19 showed a hand on the edge of the frame, fingers curled inward like it was leaning into the shot. My stomach dropped. I remembered exactly how still the building had been. No footsteps, no echoes, just me and the camera. Gordon shrugged when I showed him, said old cameras sometimes picked up residue. I laughed at that, nervous laughter again. Pattern forming. I loaded another roll. This time I photographed Lake Virex, a stretch of water locals avoided without being able to say why. I took landscapes, empty docks, a rusted canoe half sunk in algae. When I developed the film at home, my hands shaking enough to spill chemicals, the figures were clearer, standing behind me, reflected in the water where no reflection should be. One image showed something inches from my face, its outline warped by the lens, as if it had leaned in at the exact moment the shutter closed. I started checking behind me obsessively, spinning around mid-shot. Nothing. Always nothing. The camera didn't lie, but it didn't tell the truth either. It showed proximity without presence, evidence without experience. The dream started after the third roll. I dreamed of being watched through glass, of something studying me the way I studied my subjects, patient, analytical, detached. In the dreams, I could hear the shutter click again and again, even when my eyes were closed. I woke up with phantom afterimages burned into my vision, shapes that faded too slowly. I stopped going out alone, brought my friend Marcus Bell with me to the East Ridge Power Station, a concrete skeleton slated for demolition. We joked, took turns shooting, compared notes. Marcus swore the place was empty. When we developed the film, there were 3 figures behind him in one frame. He dropped the print and refused to touch the camera again. We stopped talking shortly after that. The figures began appearing even when I didn't use the camera. I'd see them in reflections,
Windows, dark screens, glossy surfaces, always just out of sync with reality. A head tilted when mine wasn't, a smile that didn't match my mouth. The camera had trained my eye, or maybe something else had. I tried to document it, like an idiot, like a professional. I set up a tripod in my apartment on Riverside Drive, pointed the camera at my living room, and triggered the shutter with a timer. When I developed that roll, I saw myself sitting on the couch, hands folded, staring straight ahead. Behind me stood a cluster of shapes, layered and overlapping as if depth didn't apply to them correctly. One had its face inches from mine. I burned that roll. The next morning, the camera sat on my kitchen table, lens cap off, shutter cocked. I researched the Argus serial number, found a police report in 1978 involving a missing freelance photographer named Calvin Rowe. His last known work included images with unidentified persons present. The report dismissed it as double exposure and paranoia. Rowe was never found. His apartment was empty except for undeveloped film canisters. No camera. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating regularly. The figures began appearing in photos taken by other people when I was nearby. Group shots, reflections, security footage. Always closer to me than anyone else. Always oriented toward the lens, like they knew where to look. The final roll was accidental. I don't remember loading it. I don't remember taking the photo. I only remember developing it, hands numb, heart hammering, watching the image surface in the tray. It was a close-up, my face, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. And behind the glass of the lens itself, inside the reflection, something looking out. I understand now. The camera doesn't capture what isn't there. It captures what's arriving. I've sealed it in a box, buried it under concrete in my basement. It won't matter. They don't need it anymore. I've been photographed enough, documented, indexed, and whatever learned how to stand closer each time is done rehearsing.
I never meant to keep the ring. I didn't even want it. It came to me the way unwanted things usually do, folded into grief, wrapped in obligation, and handed over by someone who was relieved not to be holding it anymore. My Aunt Lucinda Hale died in her sleep in Greyhaven, Massachusetts, a coastal town where the fog rolls in thick enough to feel intentional. While clearing out her house on Breakers Row, the executor passed me a small velvet box and said, "She asked that this go to family." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. The ring inside was old. Not ornate, not valuable in the obvious way. Thin band of tarnished gold, set with a dark stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. It looked unfinished, like it had been interrupted mid-design. I slipped it onto my finger without thinking. It fit perfectly. That should have been the moment I stopped. The first night I wore it, I dreamed I was standing on the shoreline at low tide, the water pulled impossibly far back. Something massive shifted beneath the wet sand, circling me. When I woke up, my finger ached. The ring felt tighter, warmer, like it had adjusted while I slept. I tried to sell it a week later at Merrow and Finch Jewelers in downtown Greyhaven. The owner, Paul Finch, examined it too long without speaking. Then he slid it back across the counter and said it wasn't for sale. Not couldn't sell it, wouldn't. His hands shook when he touched it. That night the ring was gone from my dresser. I found it the next morning, back on my finger. I hadn't put it there. After that I tried everything. Pawn shops, antique dealers, online listings. I mailed it once to a buyer in Newark who paid cash and didn't ask questions. 3 days later, it was waiting for me on the kitchen table when I got home from work. The envelope was gone. No tracking, no explanation. Just the ring exactly where my eyes landed first. Each attempt to get rid of it made things worse. Small things at first. Headaches, nosebleeds, electronics glitching when I got close. My friend Tessa said I looked pale, asked if I was sleeping. I told her I was fine. I wasn't. The dreams had changed. Now I saw hands, dozens of them, reaching toward a single point of light, toward me, toward the ring. I stopped wearing it after the Newark incident, slid it into a kitchen drawer, taped the drawer shut. That night, I dreamed of my Aunt Lucinda sitting at her dining table, staring at her bare hand. She looked relieved, peaceful. When I woke up, the tape was unbroken, the drawer unopened. The ring was back on my finger, heavier than before. My hand throbbed like it had been squeezed. I finally confronted my mother. She went quiet when I showed her the ring, wouldn't touch it, said Lucinda had tried to give it away for years, said it always came back, said the women in our family learned early that some things weren't meant to be passed on, only endured. When I asked why no one warned me, she looked genuinely afraid. Because it chooses, she said, and it already chose you. The consequences escalated fast after that. People around me started getting hurt. Tessa fell down a flight of stairs after borrowing my jacket. Paul Finch had a stroke. The buyer in Newark was reported missing. I couldn't prove it was connected, but the timing was too clean, too intentional. The ring felt tighter every day, like it was claiming more of me in exchange for staying put. Desperate, I drove inland to Ashford Hollow, where Lucinda had once mentioned a woman who understood bindings. The woman's house sat alone at the edge of the woods, windows dark, porch sagging. She examined the ring once and told me it wasn't cursed in the way people think of curses. It was committed, bound, loyal. She said, "You don't own it. It owns the space you stand in." She warned me not to try again, not to test it, said the ring didn't like being rejected. I didn't listen. I tried to throw it into the ocean, walked out onto the rocks at low tide, heart pounding, and hurled it as far as I could into the gray water. The relief lasted exactly one breath. When I got back to my car, my hand was bleeding. The ring sat snug on my finger, warm and patient. That night, someone drowned near Breakers Row. The news said it was an accident. I don't try to get rid of it anymore. I've learned the pattern. Resistance invites punishment. Acceptance brings quiet. The ring loosens when I stop fighting it. The dreams soften. The headaches fade. I still don't know what it wants in the long run. All I know, it's patient. And one day, when I finally stop being useful, I suspect it will choose someone else.
I didn't buy the mirror because it was beautiful. I bought it because it felt heavy in a way modern things don't. Real weight, real age. It hung crooked in the back of Rowan and Pike Antiques, a narrow shop on Hollis Street in Briar Glen, Vermont, its carved oak frame darkened by decades of polish and skin oil. The owner, Mr. Pike, told me it came from a boarding house that had burned down in the 1940s. He said it casually, like trivia, like it didn't matter. That should have been my first red flag. I mounted it in my hallway apartment on Maple Court, opposite the bathroom door. At first, it behaved like a mirror should. It showed me, Ethan Cole, 39, divorced, prematurely gray, moving through my mornings on autopilot. Brush teeth, adjust tie, avoid eye contact with myself. Normal stuff. The first glitch was subtle. I raised my hand to smooth my hair, and my reflection hesitated. Not lag like bad video, more like indecision, as if it wasn't sure whether to follow. I blamed fatigue. I was pulling long hours at the architectural firm, buried in zoning disputes and restoration permits. Old buildings, old layouts, old mistakes. Still, the delay kept happening. A fraction of a second at first, then longer. I'd turn my head, and the reflection would finish the movement after I had already stopped, like it was catching up, like it had been distracted. The night I noticed the extra presence, I was half asleep. I'd gotten up for water around 2 a.m., hallway lights off, only the glow from the kitchen. I glanced at the mirror without really looking, and froze. Behind my reflection, just over my left shoulder, stood another figure. Tall, indistinct, too dark to make out details. When I spun around, the hallway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, it was just me again, wide-eyed, breathing too fast. I didn't sleep much after that. I started testing it. Small movements, sudden gestures. The mirror always lagged now, consistently off by a second or two. Worse, it didn't always mirror correctly. Sometimes my reflection would blink when I hadn't. Sometimes it would smile faintly at moments when my face was still. I covered it with a sheet one night, told myself I was done entertaining nonsense. The next morning, the sheet lay folded neatly on the floor, the mirror uncovered. I called my sister Rachel, who lives in Northfield and has always been the rational one. She came over that afternoon, stood in front of the mirror with her arms crossed. "Looks normal," she said. I watched her reflection carefully. It lagged for her, too, just barely. Not enough for her to notice, but enough for me to feel vindicated and afraid. That night, the dreams started. Not symbolic dreams, literal ones. I dreamed I was standing in my hallway, staring at the mirror, watching myself sleep in the reflection while my real body stood awake. In the dream, the reflected version of me turned its head slowly and made eye contact. When I woke up, my heart pounding, I realized my reflection hadn't moved when I sat up in bed. It was still lying there, still sleeping. I researched the mirror. Old records, fire reports. The boarding house on Hollis Street had been owned by a man named Walter Griggs, a widower known for strange habits. Multiple tenants had complained about mirrors being moved, covered, or smashed. One woman claimed she'd seen her dead husband standing behind her reflection. The house burned down under suspicious circumstances. Griggs was never found. After that, the mirror stopped pretending. The delays grew longer. My reflection would continue walking after I'd left the hallway. I'd hear footsteps behind me and see no one, then catch movement in the mirror out of my corner of eye. Always half a second too late, always slightly wrong. Sometimes there were 2 figures behind me now, sometimes 3. The worst part was the realization that the reflection was learning me, my posture, my expressions, my habits. It started correcting itself, matching me more closely, getting smoother. Meanwhile, I started feeling off, sluggish, like my movements required more effort, like I was the one lagging. I tried smashing the mirror. The glass cracked, spiderwebbing but not breaking. In the reflection, I watched myself swing the hammer again and again, face twisted in panic, while in reality, my arms hung limp at my sides. The mirror version paused, looked straight at me, and smiled properly this time. Now, I avoid looking at it. I walk past with my head down. I don't turn on hallway lights, but I can feel it watching, waiting for alignment. Waiting for the moment when our movements sync perfectly, when the delay disappears. Because I understand now, the mirror isn't reflecting me, it's rehearsing. And one day soon, when I finally look up and see no delay at all, I know exactly which side of the glass I'll be standing on.
I found the doll in the back room of Hawthorne House, the old Victorian on Elmwick Street that my sister and I were clearing out after our mother's stroke. Hawthorne House had always been wrong in subtle ways, the kind of place where doors never stayed fully open and floorboards creaked even when no one was walking. The doll sat on a wooden chair facing the wall, its porcelain face hidden, its lace dress yellowed with age. I remember thinking it looked polite, like it was being punished, or told to wait its turn. My sister, Maribel, hated it immediately. She said it made the room feel crowded, like someone else was already there. I laughed and told her she was projecting stress, the kind that comes from hospitals and paperwork and guilt. Still, when I picked the doll up, I noticed something odd. The eyes weren't painted straight. They tilted slightly upward, as if it had been designed to look at taller people, adults, people entering a room. That first night, I put it back on the chair, facing the wall again. I was very deliberate about it. I even checked twice. I slept in my childhood bedroom, the one with the pale blue walls and the window that rattled when trucks passed on Elmwick. Sometime before dawn, I woke from a dream where I was standing in a long hallway lined with doors, each one breathing softly, like lungs. When I sat up, my heart racing, I knew, absolutely knew, that something was wrong. The doll was no longer facing the wall. It sat on the chair, turned fully around, porcelain eyes fixed directly at the doorway. On me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I told myself someone had come in, Maribel, maybe. Or that I'd misremembered. That happens. Memory rewrites itself all the time. I turned the doll back around and went back to bed, though I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I felt watched, studied, like something was memorizing me. The dreams started after that. Not nightmares exactly. Those are loud and dramatic. These were quiet, intimate. I dreamed of standing in rooms I recognized, but everything was slightly off. Furniture inches too close, corners darker than they should be. And always the doll somewhere in the background, never moving, never blinking, but somehow closer each time I noticed it. Maribel had her own dreams. She didn't tell me at first. Neither did I. We both pretended we were fine until the morning she found the doll sitting at the top of the stairs, facing down toward the front door. She swore she'd left it in the back room, facing the wall, before going to sleep. Her voice shook when she said it. That's when we stopped joking. I did some digging. Old family photos, boxes of letters, probate documents that smelled like dust and mildew. Eventually, I found a name written in faded ink on the inside of a cedar chest. Clara Whitlock, dated 1926. Clara was my great-aunt, a child who died young, 7 years old according to the records. Cause listed as night terrors resulting in exhaustion. The phrasing bothered me. It sounded less like a diagnosis and more like an excuse. In one photograph, Clara sat in the parlor of Hawthorne House, clutching the doll. The same dress, the same eyes. And in every photo, no matter the angle, the doll faced the camera. We tried to get rid of it. Donation centers refused it, claimed it was damaged or unsellable. One clerk said it made people uncomfortable. I left it in a trash bin behind a grocery store in Ravenscroft, drove home, and poured myself a drink. That night, I dreamed of small porcelain hands pressing against my ribs from the inside. When I woke, the doll was back, sitting on the dresser, facing me. Maribel moved out the next day. Alone in the house, things escalated. The doll appeared in rooms I hadn't entered, always oriented toward the doorway, toward me.
The dreams grew specific. I started seeing events before they happened. Minor things, harmless at first. A glass breaking, a door slamming. Then darker ones. Someone falling, someone choking. Each dream ended the same way. The doll standing closer than before, its face cracked just enough to suggest a smile. I stopped sleeping. The last straw came when I tried locking it in the basement. I chained the storage room door and shoved a heavy cabinet in front of it. That night, I dreamed I was small again, trapped in a dark place, listening to footsteps above me. When I woke, the chain was unbroken, the cabinet unmoved. The doll sat at the foot of my bed, facing me, closer than it had ever been. I understand now. The doll isn't moving. I am. Each night I wake up a little closer to it. Each dream pulls me toward the space it occupies, toward stillness, toward being watched instead of watching. I keep it facing the wall now, out of habit more than hope, but every morning it's turned around, waiting for me to catch up.
I inherited the watch the same way most bad decisions enter your life, quietly, wrapped in something sentimental, and handed to you by someone who didn't know what it really was. My Uncle Raymond died in a hospice outside Marrow's End, Pennsylvania, a town that smells like wet leaves and rusted rail lines. The nurse gave me a small envelope with his effects, a wallet, a key ring, and the watch. Old leather band, scratched crystal, brass casing worn smooth by decades of nervous fingers. It wasn't running when I first held it. The second hand sat frozen at 2:17 a.m. I didn't think much of it. Raymond was eccentric, a night owl, the kind of guy who believed timepieces carried memory. He'd told me once, half drunk, that watches didn't measure time, they witnessed it. I took the watch home to my apartment on Briar Hollow Road, set it on the kitchen counter, and forgot about it until the next morning. That's when I noticed it was ticking again, perfectly smooth, no hesitation, no repair. But when I checked the time, it was off. Not slow, not fast, just wrong. It read 2:17 a.m. I reset it, thought nothing of it. That afternoon, my phone rang. My coworker, Evan Morales, had been found dead in his car at a gas station off Route 9. Massive aneurysm, 38 years old, no warning signs. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, and I don't know why, but I looked at the watch. The second hand wasn't moving. Frozen again, 2:17 a.m. I laughed it off at first, nervous laughter. Coincidence stacked on coincidence. That's how the brain protects itself. I wore the watch anyway. It felt grounding, heavy in a reassuring way, like an anchor. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing a pattern I didn't want to admit. The watch only stopped when someone close to me died. Not acquaintances, not names on the news, people in my orbit, people I'd spoken to recently. Every time, the same moment, 2:17 a.m., no matter where I was, no matter where they were. The third time was my neighbor, Mrs. Halverson, who used to leave soup outside my door when I worked late. Heart failure in her sleep. I woke up sweating from a dream where someone was tapping glass with a fingernail, slow, patient taps. When I checked the watch, it was still 2:17 a.m. I didn't sleep again that night. I started researching the watch, old records, antique forums, obscure horology groups. Eventually, I found a mention buried in a defunct message board archived from the early 2000s. The maker? Elias Croft, a watchmaker from Ashwick County, active in the late 1800s. Croft specialized in death watches, a term I'd always associated with insects.
According to folklore, some families commissioned watches to mark the passing of a patriarch. Croft, allegedly, built one that didn't mark time, it marked transition, a fixed point, a hinge between states. That hinge was 2:17 a.m. I tried leaving the watch at home. The next death was my cousin, Liam. Overdose ruled accidental. The watch wasn't on my wrist when it stopped, but I felt it anyway, a pressure behind my eyes, a drop in temperature, like someone exhaled nearby. When I got home, the watch had slid off the counter and rested face up on the floor. Still stopped. Still 2:17. I tried destroying it. Hammer, vice, brute force. The crystal cracked, but didn't shatter. The casing dented, but never broke. That night, I dreamed I was standing in an empty train station, clocks lining the walls, every single one stopped at the same time. Someone whispered my name from behind the departures board. When I woke up, the watch was ticking again. The worst part wasn't the deaths, it was the waiting. Knowing the watch would stop again. Knowing someone I loved would vanish the moment it did. I stopped answering calls. I avoided people. Isolation became a strategy, then a prison. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. The watch kept ticking, pretending to measure hours it didn't care about. Then my father called. We hadn't spoken in months. He sounded tired, old. He asked if I still had Raymond's watch. Said he'd hoped it was gone for good. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. That night, I sat on my couch staring at the watch, listening to its steady tick, 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 like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. At 2:16 a.m., it slowed. At 2:17 a.m., it stopped. My phone rang seconds later. I didn't answer. I already knew. I still know. The watch hasn't ticked since. It doesn't need to anymore. I wear it anyway, because now I understand. It doesn't measure death. It announces it. And one day, when it starts ticking again, I know exactly whose time it will be marking.